Remember that scene in Shrek where the tiny little gingerbread man is being essentially like tortured? Like they chop off both of his legs and they're like dunking him in milk. That stuff is just, it goes way too hard. And I'm not going to sit there explaining to my child exactly what it is that he witnessed. They need to pull back on those animated films, okay? Me as an adult, I think it's hilarious, but my kids are going to be completely traumatized. I'm going to have to sit there and sift through everything. I don't know. Look, torturing a gingerbread man on the surface sounds like it's all fun and games, but there's a deeper meaning, especially if you're like a grown adult with children. You always have to like overthink these things. Anyways, all jokes aside, let's get straight into today's video because I did want to talk about two really cool Marvel action figures that have been on my radar for quite some time. I've been meaning to kind of go through them a little bit here, and I will say they're kind of technically 2.0s. I think both of them, they're essentially reissuing figures with some minor tweaks, different paint jobs, different accessories here and there, and I really do appreciate that from the manufacturers because sometimes they do need some upgrades. They do need like a new paint job, and just to kind of bring the figure full circle, because you've had an opportunity to essentially release the figure and then get a little bit of feedback from the community, from the collectors as a whole, and then kind of use that feedback to reissue the figure with those, minor little upgrades. First off, I wanted to talk about the 2.0 Mafex Scarlet Spider-Man action figure. This is one that, as I mentioned previously, has been on my radar. I've been kind of keeping an eye on it. Now, I'm not 100% sure what the upgrades are over the previous one, but this one will come with 5 alternate pairs of hands, 2 alternate head sculpts, the belt, which I think might be removable according to the description, some alternate pair of feet, the cloth sweatshirt, as well as a bunch of different webbing accessories. And I've said this before, Mafex may actually have some of the best webbing accessories out in the market. They're right up there with Mezco. They usually have different webbing accessories that can either be coiled around the wrists, or in other cases, you can actually port the actual webbing accessory between the wrist and the arm. So you'll kind of remove the wrist or the hand and then place the webbing accessory in between the hand and the arm. That way it actually looks like it's shooting the web out of there. It's really neat. It's really well designed. What's more important here is what the difference is between the feet. In the description, it didn't really go too much into detail, but you will also be able to swap those out. And I have to say, I love the design for this figure. I'm going to assume that it's mostly just a repaint, and then they added some accessories. Maybe the jacket wasn't included beforehand, but this figure looks absolutely phenomenal. It has the toe joint or the toe hinge. It has a phenomenal, midsection articulation, butterfly joints, everything that you could want from a Spider-Man action figure. At least according to the promotional images, you'll be able to get into all of those crazy dynamic poses, and I genuinely appreciate that from Mafex. Now, I will say, and this is just my personal opinion, in terms of if you want something that's widely available and is at a much more like affordable price point, I would suggest the Marvel Legends Scarlet Spider. I think that one is kind of the end all for me, just because of the value. You can find other Scarlet Spiders that are slightly better than this particular version, but you'll be paying about 3 to 4 times what you would normally pay for the Scarlet Spider Marvel Legends figure. So it's just a matter of personal opinion and perspective. There are some people out there that are willing to pay like $120 for an action figure that's maybe slightly better than a Marvel Legends action figure. For me personally, if I'm going to be paying about 100 to 120 for a figure, I need it to be considerably better than a normal Marvel Legends or a standard Marvel Legends action figure. If it's just going to be like you get more accessories and then slightly better articulation, I'm not sure if I'm going to jump on that ship. But this figure does look phenomenal. I love the soft goods. I love the shade work all around. And this is an actual figure that is now in stock. I did cover, if I'm not mistaken, not too long ago, I think it was the Into the Spider-Verse or Across the Spider-Verse Scarlet Spider, but that one is from SH, so it just depends on which one you prefer. That one had a ton of shade work, like the shading was really heavy and dark. Here, the shade work is very subtle, and it's in areas where it doesn't pop out as much. Now, it's obviously frustrating because it depends on where you're picking this figure up, because I have seen it for as low as, like, I don't know, with shipping and everything from some of these overseas companies for about like $70 to $80, but a lot of like the local retailers here in the States, like Big Bad Toy Store and Entertainment Earth, will have it for like low 100. So you may be able to find it for about like 110 to 120 depending on where you purchase it. But it's still a phenomenal looking figure if you guys are interested in picking it up. It's now in stock. As I mentioned, it's an upgraded version over the previous one. It's going to come with just like an insane amount of different accessory pieces, extra head sculpts and extra hands, and then the extra feet, which I'm assuming will add even more value to the figure. I think it's a matter of personal opinion whether this figure is actually worth it. As I mentioned, if you guys just want something that's affordable and will just display incredibly well in your display at a value price point, the Marvel Legends Scarlet Spider, I think, is just one of the best figures out there, and I just can't recommend it enough. Next up, I thought we would take a look at the 3-0 Infinity Saga DLX Black Panther, and this one is supposed to be the kinetic energy version. So I'm assuming that they released a previous version that was essentially powered down. Now you have all of the purple accents all over the body, and I have to say, I love this look for the figure. It really kind of pops. It brings out a lot of the details, a lot of the texturing because of the contrast between the purple and the black. Not to say that the original one didn't already do that, but you can see like the scaling. You can see some of the really intricate texturing for the suit. I just love the way that this figure displays. Not to mention, it also appears to have really good articulation. Some of the dynamic poses that are shown in the promotional images go above and beyond, I think, anything that, say, like the Marvel Legends line can do at this moment. Now, I will say this figure apparently only comes with 8 hands total, and then a couple of those kinetic effect pieces that can be ported onto the hands. And so I do feel like it's a little bit lacking in terms of accessories. 3-0 is actually a really good manufacturer as far as I'm concerned, and they usually do include a decent array of accessories, but here I think they got a little bit cheap. And honestly, it feels like a little bit of a slight to the community because this is essentially a reissue over the original one. I'm going to assume it's just a repaint. Maybe they throw in some extra hands here and there, but for the most part, it's the same sculpt. So it would make sense for them to go above and beyond here and add a few extra accessories, but it's just the 8 hands total, the 2 effect pieces, and then the action figure stand. Now, also worth mentioning, and I'm not sure how they integrate it into this particular figure, but they always love adding like little die cast pieces here and there, and so it kind of just, it makes the figure pop a little bit more. And especially if it's like an Iron Man action figure, it'll make some of the finishes look very chrome, very realistic. It'll make it look like it's actual metal and alloy. In this particular instance, I'm not sure if it's the entire figure that has those components or just certain areas of the suit, but it's still worth mentioning that there are pieces that actually have that, and I just think that it brings the figure together extremely well. Now, they also mentioned in the description that it does have 44 points of articulation, which is pretty good. It's pretty standard for this line, but it just goes to show how much attention they put on to the actual articulation. Sometimes a lot of these manufacturers that want to make something within that 1/12 scale and want to do like really quality work on the sculpt, they usually scale back the articulation just a little bit. But in this particular case, they're going all out. They're giving us just a beautiful looking Black Panther action figure with those purple accents, with a few extra hands, and just giving us like all the bells and whistles with this figure. As I mentioned, there are some things missing here, especially for that particular price point. You would expect a little bit more, maybe at least a couple of alternate head sculpts. You don't get like a T'Challa head sculpt, which is, maybe it has to do with the licensing rights, but it's still pretty disappointing, especially if you're looking on like Entertainment Earth and Big Bad Toy Store. You're paying well over $100, about 110. That's not including tariffs and shipping. So it just doesn't seem like something that I think a lot of people are going to be interested in. Not to mention, it does have a release date of like at the beginning, well, it says first quarter of 2026. And it is worth mentioning that not everything 3.0 related ends up selling out. Usually, if it's like an exclusive, we did have like a Big Bad Toy Store Iron Man suit not too long ago be limited to like 500 pieces, and that completely flew off the shelves. But if it's not something like that, 3.0 action figures usually kind of hang around a little bit, collect a little bit of dust on digital store shelves, and then eventually you might see a clearance or a sale here or there. So there may be a lot of people kind of waiting this out patiently, and then just hoping that the figure, drops a little bit in price. But as I mentioned prior, it's still a really good looking figure. It's really solid, great sculpt, a decent array of accessories, just phenomenal articulation. But I do feel like they pushed it a little bit here. They could have easily done a few extra accessory pieces, an unmasked head sculpt, and potentially, I don't know, a couple of extra hands, something along those lines. And this is another thing, another feature that 3.0 actually works on pretty consistently. But for example, for their Iron Man suits, sometimes you have some light up features for certain parts on the figure. That could have been something that they integrated into this figure. I know it's technically not something that you would expect, and the fluorescent paint should do a pretty decent job of kind of popping in your display, but it still could have been something extra that they could have done. And it is worth mentioning, as I said, because it's a little bit lacking in different features and accessories, they could have done something a little bit like that to kind of compensate for that price point. But overall, it's a good solid offering. If you guys are interested in picking this one up, as I said, it does have a release date for the first quarter of 2026, and it will retail depending on where you're picking it up from. But I do see it kind of floating around about that $100 price point. The Scarlet Spider should be a little bit more expensive than that, but it's around that same price point. That one is available at the moment of this recording, so definitely make sure, if you guys are interested in picking these up, to either hit the pre-order button or just be on the lookout to see where you guys can pick them up, because they're two great offerings from the Marvel universe, and they're two characters that I think for the most part should be handled, or I should say, a lot of these imported action figure manufacturers just handle these characters a little bit better. They give you that. Well, now you kind of have some of those articulation points for the Marvel Legends line, but back in the day, you didn't have things like toe articulation or double ab crunch, or they didn't have that double section at the neck. But even nowadays, you still have that slight difference. So if you want an action figure that can get into just crazy dynamic poses, that has slightly better plastic with, slightly better sculpt than like your normal Marvel Legends action figures, I think these are two great examples, two great manufacturers to jump in on. Even if you're not going to purchase them, I highly suggest you guys just look them up on their look up some of their listings and just go through the images, go through the accessories, and kind of decide whether you guys want to pick up any of these. But as I said, this is just a quick little rundown of some new offerings from the Marvel universe, from 3.0 and Mafex. If you guys are interested, definitely check them out. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Make sure to stay tuned. We're uploading on a daily basis. There's a ton of content about to hit you guys. I do have a couple of pretty big projects on the way. Those are in the works. They take a little bit of time. I'm working on them behind the scenes. So thank you guys so much for tuning in, for keeping track of the channel. And make sure to enjoy the hobby. Pose your action figures, play around with them. That's very important. Sometimes we forget to do that because we're so wrapped up in life and just, the drama of everything. But just enjoy them, okay? Stay safe out there, and I'll see you guys in the next one.